Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today is my guest, Paige Arnof-Fenn. Welcome, Paige. How are you today?
So great to be here, Desiree. Thank you so much for having me.
I am honored to have you on the show with us today. Paige, you are the founder and CEO of a global marketing and branding firm, and that's Mavens and Moguls. And I love this name. I was telling you before we started recording, I think it's so cool. And so I absolutely want to know how the name came about. But why don't you start it off by telling us, like, how did this all come to be for you? What was the path that led you in this direction?
So I joke I'm like the accidental entrepreneur. I had no intention growing up to start my own marketing and branding firm. I grew up in a family where my dad and both grandfathers were commercial bankers, and I got an MBA, and my first job out of college was on Wall Street. So I was an economics major in college. I really thought I would go into finance or banking and maybe end up one day being a CEO of a big company because my dad and grandpa's ran businesses. So that was kind of my intention. And after my 2-year job on Wall Street in the 80s, I realized that was really not going to be my calling for the rest of my life. So I went back to get an MBA and I kind of rebranded myself to be a marketing person. I got a summer internship at Proctor Gamble at their headquarters in Cincinnati. And I loved marketing. And we took marketing our first year in business school. It was a required class. I had never taken marketing before. And I loved it. I got the top score in the class. I was asked to become a marketing tutor. And then I got the summer internship in marketing, and they made me an offer to come back. I really transitioned from finance into marketing while I was getting my MBA. And the first chapter of my marketing career was in corporate marketing jobs. I was at P&G. I went to Coca-Cola. And then in the mid to late 90s, I got bitten by the dot-com bug. And I left my big corporate job to go run marketing at a venture-backed startup out in Los Angeles. And I loved it. And it was a wild ride. We raised about $40 million. We went public. We were sold to Yahoo. It was one of those crazy Internet 1.0 stories. And then my husband and I moved back to the East Coast, and I ran marketing at 2 more businesses that also had good exits. And then 9/11 happened, and marketing got cut everywhere. That was like the first budget item that everybody zeroed out to conserve cash. It was at that point that I hung out a shingle and started my own firm. But if you had asked me when I was a student or early in my career, I would have bet that I would have ended up more like a Meg Whitman, kind of MBA, Fortune 500, work your way up through marketing and running a large multinational corporation. I really thought that was the path I was on, but I just got further and further away when I realized how much I enjoyed the kind of startup world, the entrepreneurial world, and then starting my own company. Like I said, I never wrote a business plan. This was not in the cards, but I just kind of gradually got here, taking baby steps from corporate to small business to my own business.
And so how did the name Mavens and Moguls come to be?
So when I hung out the shingle and I called up people that I loved working with earlier in my career, and they had just gotten laid off because, like I said, everybody in marketing lost their jobs after 9/11. I referred to the women as the marketing mavens and the guys as the marketing moguls. So when I was sending out emails to people, I'd say, "Hey, Mavens and Moguls, I have a project. Who's interested? Who's available?" So I use that as my kind of working name, if you will. I was building the website with a college friend of mine who was learning to program. And she got to the point where we needed an official name. And I knew I didn't want to name the company after myself. I did a concept test over email, and I sent the link to a bunch of people, like 100 people who were potential clients, or people that might refer business to us. And I said, here are a bunch of names. I'm trying to name my new consulting business. Let me know what you think. And I had a lot of serious names: strategic marketing advisors, integrated marketing solutions, like very proper, serious. And I threw Mavens and Moguls in just because I was trying to give them a selection. And I thought, what the heck? And it was like my shock and delight when people voted. Mavens and Moguls ended up being like one of the top vote getters. And there were 3 people on the list who said they hated the name Mavens and Moguls. One of them said it sounded not serious, that it was too cutesy. The word maven is Yiddish for expert, or my great-grandmother would have said know-it-all. So she would have said, that's a terrible name. Most people loved it. And one of the criteria I had is that it had to be a name that you would remember and that would break through the clutter. I didn't want to be just a generic marketing company. And I don't know if you remember the ad, Not Your Father's Oldsmobile. I didn't want to be just like some fuddy-duddy, generic, boring company. One of the people who said, don't pick Mavens and Moguls, she didn't like any of the names on the list. So in the test, I had said, Company X is a strategic marketing consulting firm. Company X can help you with your PR, your advertising, your branding, your websites. Anyway, she said, I hate all your names. I think you should just call it Company X, which I thought was a terrible name. And now look at Elon Musk. He's got a company named X, so I don't know. But anyway, after I sent out the survey and all these people voted for Mavens and Moguls, about 2 days later, one of the 3 people that didn't pick Mavens and Moguls called me unsolicited. And he said, is it too late to change my vote? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, when you sent out your survey, I hated that name, Mavens and Moguls. But now I don't even remember what I picked, but I can't get that crazy name out of my head. And you said one of the criteria was it had to be memorable. I think that's a much better name than I gave you credit for. Well, that sealed the deal. So from then on, we've been Mavens and Moguls.
Oh my gosh, Paige, I love that story. Thank you for sharing the journey with us that you took and coming upon that name. And you're 100% right. That name absolutely stands out from all of those other, traditional names that you would think were like business names. This is like a serious company or whatever. And like the gentleman pointed out, completely something that you just forget in 2 seconds. And who wants that for a company?
Especially for a marketing and branding firm. If we can't do it for ourselves, why would anyone trust us and hire us to do it for them? So,
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Great story. So thank you for sharing that with us. And a couple of things I wanted to touch on in what you had said there. You went back and got your MBA. And so really that's Master's in Business Administration, right? And yet you hadn't prepared any kind of business plan. Did that come to you later, or you just stumbled into becoming an entrepreneur and launching a business without the traditional things that people do to start a business?
well, the truth is, it was such a tumultuous time post 9/11. It's hard to imagine now because the stock market goes up and down by hundreds of points all the time. But when it happened after 9/11, for your listeners and viewers that were around then, it was such a shock. When the stock market drops like 500 points, people went into panic mode. So I really didn't think I was like starting the next chapter of my career. I had worked in a lot of different businesses up until that point, and I didn't really think I was starting a company. I actually had clients before I admitted I was starting a business, which in fact is not a terrible way to go about starting a new business when the market validates the need. But my first clients right out of the block, a lot of the people that had been investors in the startups that I worked for, they knew me, they trusted me. and their companies were sold at a very good price. So after 9/11, when people needed help with marketing and they had fired their marketing department, people were coming out of the woodwork asking me for help. I had people, I had projects, and I just started putting them together. But my sense was like, this wasn't some long lost dream of mine to start my own business. And I never worked on the agency side. I was never a consultant before. I was always the client. But
Mhm.
my husband kept saying to me, like, all these people trust you. They're coming to you. There's a big red flashing sign in front of you. They need your help. You can help them. You know what they need. You've helped them before. Just do it. And so when I called my favorite marketing colleagues and everyone was like, well, I can help you. I do that. Let's call Susan. Let's call Bob. Let's call Bill. He would be great on this project. It wasn't an intentional, like, I certainly know how to write a business plan, but we just hit the ground running. Once the website went up, I felt very official. We had a logo, we had a tagline, I had stationery that I could print proposals on and send invoices on. So I thought when we started, it would just be I'd help out a few people and the world would get back to normal. I was working out of my house. I didn't rent office space. So we were very low overhead. And I wasn't doing anything proactively to market the business or anything. I just thought, oh, we'll finish these few projects and then we'll go and take real jobs again. But every one of those initial projects kept leading to more projects. So before I knew it, I was kind of in business. I think I had a very clear vision and I knew how we could help, who our audience was, what our messaging was. So I'm not sure if I had taken the time to write a proper business plan, it would have helped me do any better. I think when you're not clear on who your target audience is, what your messages are, what your competition is, business plans and strategies help you decide what not to do as much as what to do. And I was pretty clear on that. But we certainly help a lot of our clients do more formal business planning and marketing planning. But I just didn't feel like we needed it. In a weird way, I would say we've been at it now for 22 years, which is stunning to me because this is my longest job by far. All those other jobs, I think my longest job before this was 3.5 years. So I keep joking, what do I do if I get sick of my boss this time? I'm dead. But I just feel like still having fun. And I think we really are more relevant because the world we survived post 9/11, the Great Recession in 2008, 9, and 10, COVID, quiet quitting, the Great Resignation, like all these twists and turns in the economy, and we're still going strong. And I think when I started, people didn't really outsource marketing. They outsourced accounting and legal and HR. You might hire an ad agency, but you didn't outsource your marketing department. But now it's not even a question. People are very comfortable bringing in marketing expertise. And when I worked at P&G and Coke, these are massive companies with big budgets, lots of staff. They have agencies on Madison Avenue that they advertise at the Super Bowl and the Olympics. Most of my clients are like small businesses, maybe 2 million to 200 million in revenue. And they can't really justify the overhead and expense of a huge marketing staff when they don't need to do marketing 24/7. Coca-Cola's in 200 countries around the world. They're advertising every day of the week, everywhere. Some of my clients maybe only have 2 big trade shows a year or 1 big product launch, and that's where they need the help. They don't need it every week for 52 weeks.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Such good stuff in there, Paige. Really, I want to just talk about you did then what so many people are doing now, and that's working from home. So you have lower overhead. And you kind of blazed a trail, really, because nobody was doing that then. And now it's just common. Everybody can start a business from their home. And so I think it's just a testament to you saw the need, you filled the need. Absolutely. And I love the point that you made about you were testing the market kind of initially before you really got started. And this is true. I think that many people need to look at, like, where do I have skills and knowledge that I can help other people? And how can I test that out to prove that point and then really lean into it? And so I think that's excellent for the listeners too. Like, think about maybe what's something that's rattling around in their brain that they want to do and pursue it. And so I want to talk to you about your first clients. And I know that it kind of was very organic because, like you described, these people were companies that you maybe had worked with before or they knew of you from the industry. And so maybe for somebody who doesn't quite have that experience, what are some thoughts maybe you could share?
I think we learned during COVID that if you don't exist online, you don't exist. So number one, make sure you do have your website up and make it very professional. So when people look you up online, if they Google you, something pops up that's a good reflection of your direction, your brand, your messaging. I started with a website. Again, I came out of corporate. I was used to working for companies originally with logos that everyone recognized. P&G, Coca-Cola, they are market leaders in every category they compete in. When I started working for those 3 startups, no one had ever heard of any of them. And so that was kind of a test for me. When you hand someone your business card, how do you feel? I didn't realize when you work for an 800-pound gorilla, you'd get a meeting with anybody. They all love to meet with Coca-Cola. When I was heading marketing at 3 startups, the one in LA and the 2 in Boston, originally nobody knew who I was from a hole in the wall. So starting my own business, I had a little practice with coming in as a little bit of the scrappy kind of new kid on the block. But you really do need a professional image so that you clean up well. And like I said, you can work out of your house and be a professional, but you should have professional stationery, professional business cards. That doesn't mean you can't go online at Vistaprint or go to Kinko's, and you can do it doesn't need to cost a lot of money, but you do need to clean up well. The other thing that I think people might not realize or not think about, everybody's a brand today. Like, you have to take yourself as seriously as you take your most important clients. Take good care of yourself, clean up well online, and just make sure that you've got all your ducks in a row. You've got your messaging points. You can't stand for 10 different things. You need to put a stake in the ground and really own some real estate in your customer's brain. So when they have a problem that you can help them solve, if you have a product or a service, you want them to think of you first. I put a stake in the ground on marketing. Yes, I have an MBA. Yes, I've been in business, but that's kind of a broad topic. There are a lot of MBAs, there are a lot of business people, but if people had a marketing problem, I wanted to be the marketing friend that when somebody says, I could really use some help marketing, that everybody would be like, oh, I have a great person for you to call. You should look up Paige at Mavens Moguls. The other thing, that a website does not have to be fancy. You don't need all the bells and whistles, but it does need to be clean and professional and have enough breadcrumbs and easy navigation so that once people hear about you and they check you out, that it's, oh, Desiree looks like the real deal. They know what you do. They know kind of what business you're in, and the messaging is really clear. I think where people kind of confused is they try and say and do too much. You can't stand for 10 things. You can stand for 1 or 2 things, at the very most 3 messages, but you want to constantly reinforce those in everything that you do so that, again, when people have a problem, that they know you are the solution and they will think of you first.
Yeah, good stuff. You mentioned about website and letterhead and business cards. And I think that we have an advantage now that there are so many easy ways to do that where there wasn't that in the past, in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. There was none of that. And so the ease of those things now, really, you can be up and running and looking professional and presenting that professional image to others in such an easier way than you ever could before. There's Canva, and there's so many of these tools that we have available to us that make this possible in such an easier fashion. So I think we are definitely lucky now.
And the other thing we talked about earlier, until you've got some clients that are paying you, I would not spend so much money getting the fanciest stationery with the watermarks and the gold stamp on your logo on the card and a website that you're updating constantly. You just need to clear the bar. You need to clean up well, but just invest in what you need to do to find those original reference clients, because your message is going to evolve. You need to listen to the market, see what people are willing to pay for, and figure out your business model before you get too fancy and too far ahead of yourself. And don't dilute your message and dilute your brand. Like I said, you can't stand for 10 things. You can't do 10 things well. People don't remember 10 things. They remember one or two things. So if you're constantly reinforcing consistent messages on your social media, on your website, when you're meeting with people, that's the way to build a great brand from the ground floor.
Yeah, excellent advice. And you talked a little bit about budgeting. And so this question around this is, we don't have huge budget, right? We can do this sort of on a shoestring, if you will. And I think an important point to remember is, if you don't have paying clients, don't be spending money that you don't have yet, right?
Exactly. No, I have clients that have started with a very simple, clean website with just a few pages. They have downloadable brochures that people can view online or print out. They don't have a lot of collateral material and fancy stuff. And the truth is, if you're at an event or whatever, a lot of times people pick it up and then they throw it out because they don't want to carry it around anyway. So I would really save your pennies on all the bells and whistles. And the other thing is, you don't need to be everywhere saying everything. Pick your lane. What is authentic to you, and stick with it. I think that's where people kind of get ahead of themselves. And as a small business owner, you want to stand out. You want to make sure people know you, trust you, and if you can trust someone, that's kind of a great platform to build a relationship from. I tell people, you don't need fancy software. You can use Excel and have a spreadsheet with your contacts. You don't need to buy the fanciest CRM system. And if you don't like writing a newsletter or blogging, you don't have to do that. You can contribute to other people's newsletters and be active on other people's blogs. And even big companies follow this. If you remember, when Amazon started, it was not the marketplace for everything in the world. They started as the world's biggest bookseller, and all they did was sell books. It's hard to remember now because e-commerce wasn't a thing. People didn't store their credit cards online. Amazon built a relationship with people. Come to our website, find a book, give us your credit card, and we'll send you the book. And that's all they did. And then after that worked and people got comfortable, they put a lot of big bookstores out of business. Then they said, okay, now we sell music too. Do you want a CD? Then they sold DVDs. And then it was like they kept adding and adding. Okay, now Amazon practically has keys to all of our houses. They all of our credit cards. You can't live without them now. You would buy pretty much anything, your clothes, your medicine, your jewelry, your books, your anything you would buy from Amazon. But again, they built that relationship and that trust over time. And they have consistently expanded their footprint in a way where we've grown together. We've grown with them. And if you look at some of the great brands out there, Starbucks, McDonald's, when you look at the relationship that they build with their customers, every time you walk into a Starbucks, you know what's on the menu, you know what you like, you've already got a relationship with that brand, and you're comfortable and you know what it's going to look like. You know what your favorite things are. All of that is kind of already understood. Can you imagine how confusing it would be if every time you walked into a Starbucks in a different city, it was different? It looked different. The menu was different. That's confusing. When you're building a brand, you're building trust with your audience so that they know every time you show up, they know what to expect. Think about that when you're building your business. What are the breadcrumbs? What are the things that you can do to reassure your audience that you are who you say you are? You do the things you do really well, better than anybody else. And what real estate do you own in their brain so that when they need your help, they think of you first?
Yeah, excellent stuff. Just to piggyback on what you said, they know that you know your stuff and you're the first person they're going to call, but also you're the first person they're going to tell other people to go call. And that's what you want, right? Is that trust in you and your skills that they're going to tell other people about you. Highest recommendation right there,
Right.
right?
So many of my clients have come from referral and word of mouth. And I realize I never answered your question before. So another way that you can get clients for me is to provide content, either talking at events, writing articles, giving speeches. At the very beginning of my company, I was invited to give a talk to a women's networking group with a bunch of women business owners. At the end of my talk, somebody came up to me and said, "I love what you said. A friend of mine just started a company. He could really use your help with marketing. Can I get one of your business cards?" And I said, "Absolutely." I gave her my card, and the next day she made an introduction, and her friend hired us to handle all of his marketing and PR. And even with COVID, when a lot of events shut down, I do a lot of talks online and I do a lot of content marketing. I write lots of articles, and people either hear me talk or read something I wrote and they say, "Oh, we're having the same problem. This is exactly what I need help with. Can we talk? Can I follow up with you?" And yeah, when I worked with the startup companies that had investors, venture capitalists, private equity guys that invested in them, they knew how I could help their portfolio companies. So when they had different businesses with different investments, they thought of me and said, "Oh, you know what you did for company A? Can you now do that for company B, C, and D? Because I have other investments that have the same problems." So it's a great way to build your business because people can see themselves in the work that you do. Oh, that's a very common problem for a business to have. They don't have the right image, they don't have the right message, they need help building their brand. So for me, in the professional service world, those are all great ways to build your business. And again, a lot of my business comes by referral and word of mouth. So make it easy for people to remember you so that when they are in a situation where someone that trusts them says, "Do you know anybody good who can help me do X?" They go, "Oh, I know the perfect person."
That's it. Exactly. I 100% agree. Good stuff, Paige. I want to just ask you this question about, because you have worked with such various clients and really big name clients, how do you kind of tailor the things that you do for them because they're so different and they're maybe marketing completely different types of products?
The marketing basics really apply, whether you're pre-revenue startup, a Fortune 500 company, a small business, or a nonprofit. You want to have the right message targeted to the right audience with the right offer. So the basics apply at every end of the spectrum. The difference is some people have very small budgets, and other businesses you can just do more with because they have a bigger runway. I would say the two common denominator that I see across the board is most organizations really can benefit from market research. Because, and again, we learned this during COVID. Any assumptions you made about your business before the pandemic, everything got so topsy-turvy. Who your competitors were, where you work, what you wear to work, how you work, where do you go on vacation? All of those things changed during COVID. And that applies to whether you're a consumer product, B2B, B2C, nonprofit. So many assumptions changed. So if you haven't talked to your customer, and not just your primary audience, there might be a secondary or tertiary audience that affects the buying cycle of your brand. There could be gatekeepers or people in the organization. Finance people might have a say. Procurement people might have a say. It might be a CEO decision. It might be a sales decision or a board decision. So you want to make sure you're talking to all the relevant audiences and getting input from everybody who might have a vote in the process. So if you haven't done research, again, it doesn't have to be super expensive. When I was at Proctor Gamble, market research was a really big deal. We spent a ton of money. We talked to a ton of people, and it took 6 months or 9 months to go through all the machinations of the quantitative and qualitative research. Most of my clients don't have the time or the money or the bandwidth to do that. And frankly, for a lot of startups and technology companies, if it took you 6 or 9 months to do research, the market would be so different, it wouldn't even be relevant anymore. Whatever you learned 6 months ago, the market will have moved. So don't be scared to use SurveyMonkey or Zoomerang and do quick and dirty research. It doesn't have to be statistically significant, but you can be iterative in your process. Ask questions, do the best you can with the data that you got, and then continue to learn and tweak it so that the message gets better and the product. Do rapid prototyping so that you're constantly getting feedback, testing and learning, trial by fire. If you do that, whether you're a nonprofit or a early stage startup or a middle market company, you will learn so much in the process. Like I said, the difference is some people have a much longer runway. They've got more time and they've got more money. But when I worked for those startup companies, we would do the scrappiest research, going out and intercepting people on the street who looked like they were part of our target audience, asking them questions, getting feedback, going back to the office after lunch, and making changes on the site that day to see if we could get better click-through. And then the next morning, we'd look at the results and realize this worked, this didn't work, let's try it again. And we'd iterate the next day. I think that's really important. It doesn't matter what you think and what I think. It's what does our target audience think? And I think a lot of people, they'll say, I don't understand why our product's not selling. Everybody tells me they love it so much. And I'm like, okay, who's everybody? And it turns out everybody's my sister, my neighbor, my friend, my mother. That doesn't count. If they're not part of your target audience, they don't get a vote. And they don't want to tell you your baby's ugly. They're not going to hurt your feelings. They love you and they want you to be happy, but that's not going to sell more of your product or service. So I think the process I go through with the big companies, the small companies, the nonprofits, the process is very similar. The challenge is very similar. You might get to do a little more or a little less, depending on the nature of the problem, but there are no shortcuts. So you've got to find the right words and pictures that motivate people and emotionally connect with your audience so that they receive the message in a way that motivates them to purchase your product or service. When they need it, they think of you first.
Yeah, good stuff, Paige. Seriously. And the point that you just made about the ugly baby, nobody's going to tell you your baby is ugly. That popped into my head when you were talking about who loves this idea or this product. Is it the people closest to you in your life who love you and don't want to hurt your feelings? Or is it your actual customer? Okay. And those are the people's opinions that you really need to be asking. What do you think of this? And I loved so much about what you said. Yes, huge companies have a huge budget. They've got a longer runway, or like P&G, that we're talking about maybe medical things or stuff that really needs to be taking more time in the research they're doing. But if you're just a startup, it's just you, it doesn't need to take that much time and probably shouldn't take that much time. So I love that you shared all of that detail with us. And there's so many things in there. I just have to throw in the idea about printing flyers. And these days, we are trying to be so much more conscious about what is happening with our resources, right? Trees. Yes, people are going to see these flyers for about 5 seconds and then they're going to get thrown away. Nobody wants to be wasting resources. So there's so many other great ways to share this information with people that we have now that we didn't before. And another thing with the business cards, there's electronic business cards that you can share on site when you're at events. Popple is one that I use personally. I've had a guest share because it is a fantastic tool. So there's so many ways that we can save money, save resources, share this information with potential customers, and do it in a way that's responsible. Oh my gosh, so much stuff. We can just go back and talk about all the different points that you just made, but I won't do that because we have shared this conversation now for almost 45 minutes. And I know we could probably go another
We barely
hour.
scratched the surface. We haven't even talked about
Barely.
social media and all the online marketing options. And the truth is, everybody has a platform today. You don't have to be able to hire a big agency to do it for you. You can find interns or junior people that are really good tactically on social media to get your message out there. But I would just tell people, don't spread yourself too thin. Make sure you pick the platforms that are the most authentic to you, where your audience is going to find you. And again, reinforce those messages in everything that you do. I use LinkedIn. That's a very good platform for a professional service firm with thought leadership. That for me is my go-to. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on X. I'm not on Pinterest or Instagram. But if that's your audience, go there and be there consistently. If you set up a blog, you got to keep feeding the beast. You can't just do it 3 times the first week, 1 time the second week, and then take 2 weeks off. That dilutes your message. It does not build trust with your audience. But you really need to focus on the stuff that reinforces who you are and pick your lane and stick with it. Because if you do that, you're going to build a really great relationship with the audience that you're looking for. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. Put your stake in the ground where you're strong, and then reinforce all those core messages in a really deliberate, thoughtful way. and you'll be great. It doesn't take a ton of money, but it does take effort and intention.
And something that you just brought up is this shiny object syndrome. Like you see somebody doing something, think, oh my gosh, I need to be doing that. And then you're off in this other direction. And so coming back to your core message, your core point, or the core social media site you need to be on, don't worry about any of the other things. Just focus on that is such a great reminder because it's very easy to get distracted in what everybody else is doing and some new tool. And not that the tools are bad. Sometimes it may end up saving you time and you won't know that unless you do some testing, but try to remember to come back to what your main core focus needs to be. So great reminder. I want to ask you this before we begin to close out. You are on several boards and you're active in like various community kind of organizations. And so I want you to share with us, what has that been like for you? What has that meant for you to be involved in those? And how do you kind of balance this personal and professional life, if you will, for those who are listening, who are trying to balance that? Maybe they have kids and they want to be involved in these different things while trying to do launching a business and whatever. So what are your thoughts?
So it's really, again, it's authentic to me. I watched my dad and my grandpas who were very active in business, but in the community, they were very well connected and well respected. And I kind of look at them as role models. As we were saying before the podcast, I've lived in Boston now for 25 years. So I feel like I've planted roots in this community. And through my own interests and through my clients, you get introduced to organizations that can benefit from connections and talent that you can bring to the table. So when I've been invited to join boards or organizations, you meet like-minded people for causes that are important to you as well, whether it's around education or youth development or healthcare. I think it's really important for business leaders to be visible in their communities. My dad and grandfathers were in small southern towns. I live in the Boston area now. It's a bigger place, but you really can have a lot of impact. And it's great. I feel all work and no play makes for a dull life. So I think when you get involved in your community and organizations that have a mission you believe in and are doing good work, and if you can help them, it's a win. And honestly, in my life, I feel like anytime I've gotten involved in something that's meant something to me personally, it's like the more you give, the more you get. You meet really great people who have similar interests, and you might find a mentor, or you might become a mentor to a young person. I just feel like I've never regretted getting involved at the grassroots level. And it makes living in a community a much more enriched experience. Because when you're doing things in town, you're running into people, you've got your antenna up, you're making connections. It's kind of it feels good. It's like doing well by doing good. And you know what? You end up getting clients sometimes too. When people see you in a volunteer capacity or in a board capacity, they like the way you think. They like the ideas and the creativity that you bring. And even though you're all doing something on a volunteer basis, they may end up making an introduction to somebody who has a huge budget and saying, I've worked with this person on the board of this nonprofit for years. She's really creative. She always has great ideas. You should talk to her for your new campaign. We've gotten some amazing introductions that were built on situations where we didn't make any money. Maybe I wrote a check to the organization as a supporter, but through that group, I met some incredible people that have led to some amazing introductions.
Yeah. I love that. Really, the grassroots effort, like we really can make such a difference in our local community. and we want to make a change in the world, that's where we need to start, right? It's right in our hometowns. Where we live now is going to make the biggest impact. And I love that you said give to get, because I feel like that's so true. The giver's high, if you will, and how much it impacts us when we give to others and the difference that can make in the lives of everyone in the community and ultimately the world. I love that you shared that. So thank you. I always love to have my guests share if there are books or podcasts that have been influential or beneficial that they want to share with the listeners. So, Paige, if you have some that you want to share with us now, I'd love to hear it.
So I read a lot. I listen to a bunch of podcasts. Wow, that could be a whole nother, like we could talk for another hour. So the two podcasts that I'm really enjoying right now, if Julia Louis-Dreyfus, she has a podcast called Wiser Than Me. She's in her 60s and she interviews women in their 80s and 90s, women older than her, and they're just incredible. It's actresses and singers and people that have done amazing things in their life. And she just talks to them about what it was like kind of in a different generation, how they got to where they got, what inspired them. So she talks to them for like maybe 45 minutes. And then at the end of the podcast, she hangs up on the person she's talking to. And then she calls her own mother, who's in her 80s. And she wraps up the podcast telling her mother, "Oh my God, Jane Fonda is amazing. I have to tell you, Carol Burnett, Rhea Perlman, like whoever it is, Sally Field, like all these amazing, interesting women." And they just talk about their lives. And then she and her mom kind of debrief it. So it's not just for women, but I love it. And it's, if you're looking for just something that makes you feel good, and a lot of these people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, it's like they're not posturing. They're not at the peak of their careers. And they'll tell you about the hardships and the problems. And you might think of them as an Emmy winner, an Oscar winner with all their highlights, but they'll talk about the struggles and the hardship. And you realize nobody gets a free pass in life. And they're able to laugh and kind of learn from the setbacks. So I've loved that one. There's another one called Smartless. It's Sean Hayes from Will and Grace, Will Arnett. I think he was on Saturday Night Live. He's a comedian actor, and Jason Bateman, who's been in a lot of shows. It's the three of them. They're great friends. And they interview one person on each podcast. And one of the three of them invites them, and the other two are surprised at who shows up. Again, great stories. Sometimes they all know the person, and sometimes one of them knows it, but the other two don't. And they are so off the cuff. They don't do any prep because two of them don't even know who the person is before they start talking. But it's really, they don't take themselves seriously. But you hear about before they were discovered as actors, and some of them are divorced. Some of them have long-term marriages. And it's just a really great perspective on life and hardship and success. So I love both of them. If I'm doing something and I just want to listen in the background, they make me happy. I think about something new. It kind of sparks creativity when you hear all the things that they've done. So I love those. And wow, books I read all the time. I'd say if you haven't dusted off Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, that's a classic. It's evergreen. The advice I think still holds up 100 years later. I read a lot of biographies, autobiographies, memoir. I loved a lot of the Saturday Night Live people, Tina Fey, Molly Shannon, Dick Ebersol, who put it together. They all wrote about their careers and their lives. You laugh, you cry. It's really great stories. But I don't know. I'm so intellectually curious and kind of a voracious. I absorb all these great stories because it's just so interesting to kind of see the world through a different lens.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Paige. Those are great, great recommendations. And it sounds like true oral history is what we've got here with Julia Louis-Dreyfus's podcast. And she's interviewing people, even Smartless. They're interviewing people, and it's this oral history, right? Their story, their journey, what they had to overcome, and the challenges and obstacles and all of that. And this is what we absolutely still have to have. We have to have these stories shared with everyone so that we can all learn and grow and become better because of it, and share that then with the next generation. And so great recommendations. I'll put those in the show notes for sure. Dale Carnegie, absolutely 100% book that has survived the test of time. I feel like what he discusses in there, the advice that he shares in there is still valid today. So 100%, you need to read it if you haven't already. Okay, so before we close out, I wanted to have you share with us. You mentioned that you're on LinkedIn. Is that the best way that people can reach out to you if they have questions? You want to share your website now so people can go and dig into all the stuff that you've got there? I would love to have you do that.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. They do not have my last name hyphenated. It's all smushed together. So Paige Arnof-Fenn, all one word. But if you start putting my name in, hopefully you can find me. My website is mavensandmoguls.com, MAVENSANDMOGULS.com. And one of my clients always said, because my name is hyphenated and my company has an ampersand, she can never remember all the words. So in Google, she puts in Paige and Mavens, and I pop right up. So thank God for search engine optimization. You can always find me there.
Okay, well, I will put the links in the show notes to make it really easy for listeners to find you. But yeah, that's good to know that we can just Google those two things and you should hopefully come right up. Well, thank you again, Paige, for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge and this information with us. It's been tremendous, and I truly am honored that you have taken the time to do that. So thank you again.
Well, thanks for having me. This has been really fun.
Absolutely. All right, we'll talk more soon.
Sounds great.
Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. We appreciate your time and curiosity as we explore fascinating topics together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to join us next week for another amazing episode. Remember, your journey of learning and growth is a continuous adventure, and we're thrilled to be part of it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next week, stay curious and keep exploring those pockets of knowledge.